The Texas Alcoholic Beverage Commission has launched a new unit that traces alcohol consumption back to its source in DWI cases involving injury or death. Good morning and welcome to DS News Desk. I'm Anna Summersett, and here's some commentary on legal news making headlines on May 17, 2021. The Target Responsibility Alcohol Connected Emergency Unit, or TRACE, started this year and is made up of 10 investigators who determine where drunken drivers consumed alcohol and if they were overserved. So what kind of impact could this new unit have on bars and restaurants? Let's first hear from the TRACE unit.
The need to cut down on DWIs in the state of Texas was the driving force behind this.
Captain David Whitt is among the investigators in a new TABC trace unit designed to follow up and figure out if an offender was overserved and if a bar, restaurant, or store broke the law.
The word's getting around that this is in place, and for those that may need to tighten some things up, I think it's getting their attention, and they're doing so.
Since the 10-person unit's creation in January, they've already made multiple arrests. And for the investigators in the units, the work is especially personal.
It impacts the investigators, and I think it gives them a little bit more drive than they would normally have to get out there and enforce the law.
Enforcement that the family of Jose Amzquita hopes might save others.
So for those of you who aren't necessarily familiar with the dram shop law, it essentially is this, that bars or restaurants are responsible for the alcohol that they serve on premises. And if they do end up serving or over-serving someone who is visibly and obviously intoxicated, then the restaurant or bar could be liable for what subsequently happens if a DWI, or intoxicated driver, results in the injury or the death of another person. Now, this doesn't yet extend to what we call social hosts. And social hosts are if you and I, in our personal capacity, were to have a party or have people over for dinner at our home and served alcohol, and someone became visibly intoxicated, went out onto the road and committed the offense of DWI and ended up injuring or killing someone, which would enhance that offense to an intoxication assault possibly, or an intoxication manslaughter. The social host, you and I, wouldn't be personally liable. But restaurants and bars, according to the Texas legislature, have a heightened sense of responsibility in that way. And what's interesting about the new TRACE unit is they now have assigned investigators to trace the alcohol. They obviously can't do that by forensic methods. They have to use other signs of investigation, whether it's receipts found on the individual in the bar, witnesses, passenger in the vehicle, credit card receipts. If anything in their investigation points back to a bar or a restaurant as being the primary source of consumption for the individual who was visibly intoxicated, and they can prove that the individual was visibly intoxicated or obviously intoxicated, then they can go after that bar, the individual bartender, criminally. And there have been several arrests made. I think what's interesting about this area of the law as it continues to develop is, what is intoxication? What does it mean to be obviously and visibly intoxicated? In Texas, there's a legal definition for intoxicated. It means not having the normal use of your mental faculties, not having the normal use of your physical faculties, or having an alcohol concentration of 0.08 or higher. Now, you and I know that tolerance builds over time, as an adult drinker can build tolerance as they continue to drink over a term of years. And whereas 2-3 alcoholic beverages may have affected them earlier on in their drinking lifespan, it doesn't have the same effect. And they have to continue to drink more alcohol to have the same effect visibly to people who are looking at them. When we talk about how alcohol affects the body, we know that the first thing to go is judgment. But gross motor skills is later. And so it's not until a point of intoxication reaches a higher level that we start to see it in someone's balance or someone's walking or someone's movements. So what does it mean to be visibly intoxicated? Where does that scale stop? Is it different for different people? Well, of course it is. We all have different levels of tolerance. Do we have to consider what this person's other ailments are. Let's say you have someone who has some type of physical disability. Should the bartender have known that their behavior was due to alcohol or due to that physical disability? There's a lot of questions that remain, but ultimately these are questions of fact, which means that they would be decided by the ultimate fact finder, the jury in the case, or potentially a judge if an individual were to waive their right to a jury trial. As a DWI practitioner, we certainly understand that this scale of intoxication that we deal with legally is different for everyone. And there's a standard of that 0.08 that is instituted in order to kind of circumvent that we can all have certain learned behaviors whenever we drink alcohol. And that 0.08 standard is what's used on the DWI case or the intoxication manslaughter case or the intoxication assault case. Because even if someone's not obviously or visibly intoxicated, at that 0.08 per se limit, legally in Texas they are. So you can certainly have a situation where someone is legally intoxicated under the criminal law, but it is not such that it is obvious or visible to the individual who served them. So the person committing the DWI offense could be convicted, whereas the bartender or the individual serving them at a restaurant could not be criminally responsible or could later be acquitted. So those are some interesting developments. We'll keep an eye on this one. If you guys have any questions or comments, please list them below. I'm Anna Summersett. Thanks so much for joining us today on VS News Desk.